clause by clause on C10. This is, of course, as was pointed out earlier offline, this is meeting number 40. As you know from the last meeting, we left off with PV 21.1. Ms. McPherson, sorry about that. I'm a little, oh yes, there you are. Ms. McPherson, you have your hand up. Is this something I can address?
Well, I just was very interested in seeing if there was a way that we could move forward and look at the motion that I had brought forward last time. And I know that we do need to finish on the green amendment that we discussed for 2 straight hours last meeting. So I'm certainly hopeful that we don't go through that again today and that we actually can continue to work to improve this legislation. So I would like to propose that we take that vote on the green amendment and that we move on to the motion that I've tabled, if that's at all possible, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yes, just for everyone's edification, that the motion has been deemed moved. It is from what we call independent or unrecognized party, which is, in this case, it would be Parti Vert, the Green Party from Mr. Manley. That is what we are discussing right now because it is deemed moved. But I was committed to you, Ms. McPherson, last time about doing your motion, and you had the same commitment in this meeting that once we deal with 21.1, we will go and discuss your motion that you want to put forward. Monsieur Reyes, s'il vous plaît. Sorry, sir, you have to, I can just do this now and everyone knows what that means. You have to lower your boom, sir. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monday morning here. Sorry about that. So I was just going to ask Ms. McPherson to send something to the clerk. So I sent the clerk amendments, or rather our party sent the clerk amendments. And I know that the last time the clerk was asking me for the reference numbers. So, Mr. Chair, would you allow me to tell the clerk those reference numbers now? Or should I wait until we've gotten through Mr. Manley's amendment and Ms. McPherson's motion, and then I can move on to our things that we want to table?
You're on mute, Chair.
You're on mute.
Lord. Yeah, I got a Monday too. Yes, how about you let the clerk know what the reference numbers are, so that way when we get to it, we could make it that much more efficient. So go ahead.
Donc, merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Madam Clerk, they are amendments 2 to 6, so you're supposed to have 5 of them. I believe that they are in order. So the first one is 113-42583. So 113-42-583. That's the first one. The second amendment. Martin. Thank you. So the second reference number is the following. 113-23641. So 113-23-641. Third amendment, reference number 113-23-725. So ending in 725. So that's 3 of them. And then the penultimate one is 113-26200. So 113-26200. And the last one is 113-25014. So 113-25014. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That will make things more quick for everyone when our term rolls around.
Merci beaucoup. Ms. McPherson.
I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Chair. Mr. Reyes had asked that I send the motion to the clerk, but the clerk has already received it and sent it to the members. So I'm not exactly sure what he'd like me to send, if I could get some clarity.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. If the clerk could probably send it once more. I believe you're talking about both motions.
The one that I wanted to talk about most was the first motion that I had sent out about sitting
Correct.
during July and August, but that
Yes,
one
yeah.
was sent out last week. Both were sent out last week, so I think all committee members should have both of those motions.
That was my understanding as well. If anybody does not have the motions, if anybody does not have the motions from Ms. McPherson, can you let the clerk know and receive a copy? Okay. That being said, I don't see anybody up right now. As I mentioned, we are on PV 21.1, an amendment put forward by Mr. Manley, and we'll pick up the discussion where we left off. We are still in clause by clause. I don't see anyone who wishes to speak on it, now that has collapsed, that brings us to our vote. So we're voting on PV 21.1. Shall PV 21.1 carry?
No.
No.
Hearing no, we go to a vote. Madam Clerk.
PV 21.1, Mr. Housefather.
No.
Madame Bessette.
No.
Ms. DeBruson.
No.
Ms. Ian.
No.
Mr. Lewis.
No.
Mr. Reyes.
No.
Mr. Aitchison.
No.
Mr. Shields.
No.
Mr. Waugh.
No.
Monsieur Champoux.
No.
Ms. McPherson.
No.
11 nays, 0 yeas.
Okay, I declare the amendment negatived. That brings us to the end of 21.1. I have some news. This now brings us to the end of clause 7. It only seemed like yesterday we've just begun.
Mr. Chair,
7.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Mella.
Yes, the amendment that Mr. Reyes just sent us are on clause 7.
Oh, I see. Well, may I speak too soon? I just did. It appears we have the amendment that was just sent in. And Mr. Mella, can you tell me the number, please? We're on CPC.
The number of the would be CPC 9.2, but it doesn't have that number. I can give you the reference number if you prefer.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, the last digit of the reference number would be 2583. I believe that what Mr. Reyes just indicated.
Okay. All right. Is everybody ready to proceed with debate, or do people have questions? I see some nodding heads. Mr. Housefather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we don't have copies of these amendments.
All right.
The clerk is indicating 1 second.
Yeah, 1 second. We're just getting around to it now. In the meantime.
Perhaps I could raise my motion in the meantime, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, actually, I did commit to you that we would do that. I thought we were ending with clause 7, but we were not ending with clause 7. But with all due respect to Mr. Reyes, there you are. I did commit to Ms. McPherson that I would get to her motion. So it appears that we're going to get to the motion. So before I do that, though, Ms. McPherson, before I get to it, I want to just check with the clerk. And does anyone have any more questions about what was put forward by Mr. Reyes? Mr. Reyes, go ahead.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was just going to let you know that I think it would be very gentlemanly of us to allow Ms. McPherson to table her amendment, because I don't think that would change anything with our sequence of amendments. So I fully agree. She may proceed.
Okay, but Ms. McPherson's on a motion? Right, okay. All right, not seeing any questions, we're going to go to Ms. McPherson. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I brought forward a motion last week for this committee because I'm quite concerned that we are not progressing through C10 at the rate that I think we all want to. I hope that everybody in this committee is interested in making sure that we get the very best piece of legislation that we possibly can at the end of this clause by clause process, and that we are all being very propositional to add amendments to try to make this the very best legislation we can that will protect the Canadian broadcasting landscape, protect Canadian artists and our cultural sector, which is vitally important, and also ensure that Canadians' freedom of expression is protected. So I want to be as propositional as I can. I want to work with all of my committee members to make this happen. I know it's extremely important legislation. As we know, it has not been updated in 30 years and it's well overdue. So I'm interested in proposing that. I know that there are times during July and August that we are unable to sit, and I do also realize that this would mean we would be sitting in person in Ottawa, but I would like to propose that the committee take the decision to sit into July and August to ensure that we have time to complete this work. I think allocating to stop the debate and to stop the conversation on C10 would cause a lot of problems because we won't have had time to go through the important amendments that I know all parties are putting forward. That said, I also think that filibustering and not letting us get this work done is also a mistake. So this gives us a little bit more space, a little bit more runway to get a good piece of legislation. So
Mr. Chair.
Motion to be.
Monsieur le Président, je lève ma main.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to let you know that I'm raising my hand.
Yes, I have. Mr. Reyes, I believe your hand was left up from last time. I also have Ms. de Bruzen, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Champoux. Ms. de Bruzen, you have the floor.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was just checking on that, so I just took down my hand first. Look, I agree with Ms. McPherson that extra time would have helped, certainly at the beginning, to try to move this forward. And in fact, several times at the beginning of the study of C10, I tried to get extra time for extra meetings so that we could move through this quickly. We have now reached a point where in the last meeting, we did not vote on a single amendment. Adding extra meetings during the summer isn't going to help us get to where we need to be, because at this point we have just reached a standstill. And quite frankly, Ms. McPherson is well aware that there's a motion for time allocation, and I would hope that she would support that so that we can put this important bill forward and make sure that we are doing what we need to have web giants pay their fair share and to support Canadian artists. And I would point out that, the Conservatives have been filibustering here at committee, as is their right to do by parliamentary procedure, same as it is our right to bring forward a motion for time allocation. But I would like to point out to Ms. McPherson that, I think that it's been laid bare at this point when I'm looking at statements that have been made by the Conservatives that the issue here isn't about freedom of expression, what they're really pushing for. And in fact, if I could just point out what Ms. Harder stated to her local press about C10 specifically and what is trying to be done, the quote that I have, I believe, is these artists are not able to make a living off of what they are producing. So they require grants that are given to them by the government. And so these little niche lobby groups composed of outdated artists are going to the Liberal government and asking them to change these large streaming companies charge these large streaming companies in order to bring about more money to put into these grant funds so that these outdated artists can then apply for that money so that they can continue to create material Canadians don't want to watch. That's the fight that we're in about Bill C10 right now. And, that is saying that artists like the Arkells or shows like Heartland are not things that Canadians want to watch and that we shouldn't be supporting as a government. I don't believe that's true. And I guess my question for Ms. McPherson is she going to support time allocation so that we can move forward to support artists? Or is she going to take the position that these are outdated artists that we don't need to be providing support for? Thank you.
Okay, I have Ms. McPherson in the lineup for talking. In just a few moments, though, I'm going to have to go to Mr. Champoux first. Mr. Champoux, and then Mr. Reyes. Mr. Champoux.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need to support and applaud my colleague's words regarding what has been reported by Leadbridge Herald on the Conservatives' position with regard to the situation of artists. I found that very concerning to see that this was the opinion on the artists' world, and that is this understanding of Bill C-10, which is totally not true, but we'll be able to come back. And speaking to Ms. McPherson's motion, Mr. Chair, we know all that the leaders of the various parties are negotiating, are discussing how things are going to evolve regarding the summer schedule. And the committee cannot decide, for example, to sit in a hybrid mode without any agreement having been reached by authorities. So in that sense, I think it would probably be wise to add a sub-amendment to Ms. McPherson's amendment and to add that everything would be conditional, of course, to the results of discussions of party leaders. So without excluding the subject of the motion, I think we need to take into account discussions which are ongoing, which of course will influence decisions that we'll make. So I'd like to add that this motion, to the text of the motion, that everything is conditional to the results of discussion that are ongoing between party leaders.
Amendment now, you're talking about adding it to where within the amendment, or sorry, within the motion itself, where do you propose to put that, at the very end?
Oui, tout à fait.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, does everyone have an understanding of what was just talked about? After Mr. Reyes, I'm going to come back to our clerk to read out again what the sub-amendment is, the amendment is to the motion. Mr. Reyes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to speak about Ms. McPherson's motion, but now that there is a sub-amendment, should I first address the sub-amendment, or should we wait to have discussed the sub-amendment and then you'll give me the floor again to speak about Ms. McPherson's motion?
First, sir, if you focused on the amendment that's been put forward, and then we can get back to the main motion, whether it's amended or not. Mr. Reyes, you have the floor.
Perfect. So, Ms. McPherson, I think the intention is very noble on our side. There's no problem to continue talking about C10. We see many concerns with that bill, and we've emphasized that several occasions. It's a very complex bill. It's a bill that has not been well thought of. There are several amendments now. Some are still upcoming, which are very important. So I don't really see how we could move forward with this bill without us having the time to actually look at all, the topics. But I'm just wondering if now, Ms. de Bruzen was saying that it was a bit late. Well, I have the impression it's a bit early because we have a time allocation that is waiting or threatening us that should be tabled today, and that would mean that the work would be done as far as our committee is concerned. So the Liberals would have decided to end the work that we have to do, even if we're being told that committees are independent all the time. So it's maybe a proposal that I'm putting forward, maybe not an amendment, but shouldn't we, very politely postpone your motion to Friday to see what's going to happen with time allocation, whether Liberals are actually implementing that ultimatum? Because then, in that case, the motion wouldn't be necessary anymore. And if there's no time allocation, well, I think that your request would be quite legitimate. So I'm just putting out this idea, very humbly putting out this idea.
For people watching, there is no motion of time allocation here at committee. What my colleagues are talking about is a possible time allocation in the House. I just want to make that clarification for those who are watching us from afar. Madam Clerk, let's clear up some of the wording around the amendment that Mr. Champoux proposed. Mr. Champoux, if you're there, we may call on you in just a second. Nevertheless, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, sir. Non, ça va être ma question pour Monsieur Champoux.
So it's actually a question for Ms. Champoux. Could you maybe repeat your sub-amendment, please? It's just a suggestion that would be added to the end of Ms. McPherson's motions, and that would state that everything is conditional on the results of the discussions which are right now ongoing between party leaders. So I don't have any specific wording, but maybe, the law clerk could help us with the right wording. I don't want to, improvise as an expert in legislative wording, but everything, is kind of conditional on the result of the discussions between party leaders.
Okay, thank you. Now, before I go on, we're going to work on some of that for now, try to get the right wording. In the meantime, I see there are enough people who want to talk about it. I don't want to stymie the debate right now, so I just want to go to Ms. McPherson, and then I'll go to Ms. DeBruzen. Mr. Reyes, I see your hand is up. Is that from the last time? I don't want to miss you. Okay, perfect. So we have Ms. McPherson, then Ms. DeBruzen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a few things. First of all, in terms of Mr. Shampoo's sub-amendment or amendment on the motion, I suppose, I had suggested that we could go forward in an in-person format. So I recognize that the House leaders, I am a deputy House leader myself, and I recognize that the House leaders are discussing what the hybrid will look like into the summer months, but I was not proposing that we impose upon the hybrid system, but that in fact we would come to Ottawa and travel to Ottawa for the meetings. We could probably have longer meetings that could get a little bit more done. Now, in terms of what the questions that I have that were put forward both by Mr. Reyes and Ms. DeBruzen, I feel very much that we are now in a situation where the Liberals have put forward a flawed bill. We are trying to fix that bill. We are trying to be propositional. We are trying to fix that bill. And the Liberals have now put forward in the House, not in committee, a time allocation of 5 hours, which is wholly insufficient to get through the remaining amendments that need to be examined so that we make sure that we have good legislation. That's wholly insufficient. It hasn't been done for decades. Such a heavy-handed maneuver has not been done for decades. And last time it was done, there was 10 hours. So it was twice as long that was allocated. So I have some real concerns about being told by Mr. Bruce that I am either choosing to support the Liberals' very heavy-handed move through time allocation, or abandon and support the very disturbing and very wrong-headed comments of my colleague from Lethbridge. I, in fact, feel like we're in a situation where the flawed legislation that was brought forward by this government needs to get fixed. The Conservatives are making it impossible for us to fix that legislation. I'm incredibly frustrated by both the Liberals and the Conservatives and their inability to see that we have a job to do and we have an obligation to work as hard as we can.
Ms. McPherson, I apologize for interrupting for just 1 second. I just want to point out to everyone that we're still on the amendment that Mr. Shampoo put forward before we get into the main motion.
Mr. Chair, I was just responding to some of the questions that were brought forward.
I understand that. But when we get back to the main motion, we can do that. Now, keep in mind, I'm pretty flexible over the arc of conversation that we have here, because if you want to start out with the amendment leading into the overall motion, I'm all for that. However, I have to watch this accordingly because I know some people get upset if I don't. And
I'll come back to the amendment. I just have one more comment that I'd like to make.
You still have the format. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you. Ms. McPherson, go ahead.
Thank you. So knowing that we do need to get this legislation fixed, that we still have 30 plus amendments to go through at this point, I would suggest that we take maybe a bit of advice from Mr. Reyes, and that we consider how well the committee is able to get through our work today, and then go forward. The other thing I was thinking too is that if we did have this motion in place, if we did agree to sit during the summer, there would be no need for the time allocation legislation. So the Liberals would not need to bring that forward, because we would already have agreed that we will continue to work effectively as a committee, as the people of Canada have tasked us to do, to get this legislation right.
Okay. Ms. DeBruzen.
Thank you. I just would want to revisit that point, that there is absolutely a need to move to time allocation, because we could sit all summer and we are going through entire meetings without voting on a single amendment. And for the past several meetings, even when we do move vote on an amendment. It's one or two a meeting. At that pace, we will not complete the study of C10. We will just keep going for months and months and months. So
Okay.
I do believe that there's a bit of a misconnect, if anything, on that, to say just add in a few more meetings this summer and we'll be able to complete it. That's clearly not been what's been shown over the past weeks and even I would say months.
Folks, we seem to be debating once again the overall amendment or the overall motion. Can we just focus first on the amendment, and you can tie it into the main motion, but I really need you to talk about Mr. Champoux' amendment in the meantime. Mr. Housefather.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Et j'apprécie toujours énormément.
And I always very much appreciate Mr. Champoux' contributions, which are always in good faith. As for this time, I have nothing against Mr. Champoux' sub-amendment, but I am against Ms. McPherson's main proposal, and I'll explain why.
All my friendship for Ms. McPherson, who, again, I respect very much as a member of the committee. Normally, I would agree with this motion. Normally, I would agree we should work all summer to get a law right and continue debate as long as there was actually debate going on that was reasonable with respect to each amendment. But that's not happening. In the last meeting, we spent 2 hours filibustering on an amendment that each and every member of this committee voted against. And each and every member of this committee was going to be against it from minute number one. Yet we spent 2 hours on it. And so as someone who has really tried in good faith to work with members of all parties on this committee from the beginning, I have at this point grown completely exasperated by what has happened in terms of us not working in good faith. And so I see no reason for us to sit here having meeting after meeting of 2 or 4 hours and not advancing on the bill. And so I don't see any other alternative to move forward unless I see a huge change in comportment from the Conservatives at this point, then going to time allocation. So I'm against I'll vote for Mr. Champoux' sub-amendment, but I'm going to vote against the motion as sub-amended because I just don't see that it's going to help us in any way. And thanks very much for the effort though, Ms. McPherson.
Okay, I see Monsieur Reyes. We're on the amendment from Mr. Champoux.
Oui.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think that Mr. Champoux' proposal is very legitimate. And it shows a great respect for the work of parliamentarians and our House leaders who are trying to find solutions by holding democratic discussions. And I think it also works with what Ms. McPherson is trying to achieve. But I think it's unfortunate what our Liberal colleagues are saying, because I would like to remind everyone that this was a bill full of gaps and that took a major shift partway through our study of it. So I don't think that there should be a gag order. That has not been done in over 20 years. It was never done under Mr. Harper's previous government. He never put a gag order on a parliamentary committee's work. For the past 6 years, Liberals have never stopped repeating how committees are independent. I'm raising my hand. Mr. Champoux is raising his hand. So, Ms. McPherson, I would like to let you know that we are rather in agreement with your idea. And I also think that we're one meeting too soon to adopt it. But it might be cancelled because of the gag order by the Liberals, and if that happens, then that will be that. Otherwise, we can progress. My hand is up, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, folks. I have Ms. de Bruzen, then I have Mr. Champoux. Ms. de Bruzen, did you
No, I think you had Monsieur Champoux before me. My hand's down.
Okay, Mr. Champoux, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, of course, when a sub-amendment is tabled to change the motion, it obviously leads to a debate. But spontaneously, right away, I would say that I'm not open to doing things out of order. I think that we should have as much debating time for Bill C-10 as possible, but it's very important to adopt this bill. So the sub-amendment that I'm proposing was an amendment in case Ms. McPherson's motion were to be adopted. I want to ensure that leaders' discussions that are currently underway do not interfere with what we're agreeing on here in committee. So, Mr. Chair, I was thinking, what good would it be to add meetings if committee members will only continue to filibuster? So I just wanted to specify my intent. My intent was to protect the discussions that are underway right now between leaders in case McPherson's motion is adopted.
Okay, Ms. DeBruzen.
I move to adjourn debate.
All right, has everybody heard that? And of course, we go straight to the votes. The put forward by Ms. DeBruzen was a motion to adjourn the debate. Madam Clerk.
Is there a motion to adjourn debate on the motion of Ms. McPherson? Mr. Housefather.
Yes.
Madame Bissett.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président. Juste des clarifications.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. To clarify,
Yeah, go ahead.
Pouvez-vous m'expliquer ça veut dire quoi exactement?
can you explain what exactly it means procedurally, what Ms. DeBruzen's motion means? I just want to be sure before I vote.
It means we are going to adjourn the debate on Ms. McPherson's motion. Is that okay? Is everybody clear with that now?
And then do we vote for it or
Sorry,
no?
Ms. McPherson?
Do we vote on the motion or is it?
No, we adjourn the debate. Simple as that. And then we go on to what we were dealing with earlier. We deal with clause by clause in C10. Is everybody okay?
Donc,
I just want to make
donc,
sure
Monsieur,
everybody understands.
donc,
Go ahead,
Monsieur
Mr.
le Président,
Reyes.
non.
Yeah, Mr.
So what I'm understanding is that Ms. DeBruzen asked for us to adjourn debate, and in doing that, she is blocking us from voting on Ms. McPherson's motion?
I'll tell you what. Maybe I'm not explaining it well. Madam Clerk, would you like to explain the procedure here on adjournment of debate?
Oui, ajourner le débat.
Yes, so adjourning a debate means that for the rest of this sitting, we would no longer discuss Ms. McPherson's motion.
Versus the debate can be resumed at a subsequent meeting, but until the end of this particular meeting, we will not resume debate on the motion to extend into the summer. So there will be no vote on the motion of Ms. McPherson at this time. The vote that we would be holding would be whether or not the committee wants to adjourn debate.
Okay. Now is everyone clear? We're adjourning the debate. There will be no vote on that. Okay. What I'm going to do, since there's been some time that has passed, let me just back up a little bit and restart the vote once more. Madam Clerk, the motion puts forward to adjourn this debate.
Yes, sir. So on the motion to adjourn debate, on the motion of Ms. McPherson to extend into the summer hours, adjourning debate saying yes means we will no longer talk about this. Saying nay means we resume consideration. Mr. Housefather.
Yes.
Madame Bissett.
Yes.
Ms. DeBruzen.
Yes.
Ms. Ian.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Monsieur Reyes.
Non.
Mr. Aitchison.
No.
Mr. Shields.
No.
Mr. Waugh.
No.
Monsieur Champ.
Oui.
Ms. McPherson.
No.
Six yeas, 5 nays.
So the debate has been adjourned. We cannot bring that debate back into play here for the rest of this meeting, but we can at subsequent meetings, just so that you know, and that will be the motion of Ms. McPherson. Now, we are now proceeding to clause by clause, and we're going to pick up again. I know there is a CPC amendment. However, that being said, we have to take a break at this time. I need to have a discussion with the table staff regarding the proposed amendments. So I'm looking at about 5 minutes. And once you're ready to come back on, please go on screen, turn your video back on as we do before. So we're going to suspend for up to about 5 minutes. Thank you. everybody. Sorry for the break. That was a little longer than I anticipated. So I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed on what is happening. So we just received several amendments from the Conservative Party, and I just wanted to, these would be under CPC's amendments, but what I'm going to do is, since we're following along on our song sheets once again, I'll ask you to turn to hymn number 9.2. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the reference numbers that were handed in, and I'm going to put a label on them as to what party and the amendments they are, okay? So we're starting with reference number. I'll just read the last three numbers because I think that's just for the sake of time. This one reference number is 583. That will now be CPC 9.2. That is what we're going to address momentarily. Following that, reference number, last three numbers, 641 is going to be now CPC 9.3. For those of you watching at home, this means that is an amendment from the Conservative members of the committee. That's what the CPC is for. The last three numbers that are 725, reference number 725, that is now CPC 9.4. Moving right along. Reference number 200, last three numbers, that is now CPC 9.5. Reference number 014 is now going to be CPC 9.6. Now, we've just received another. These are the last three numbers, reference number 023, that will be CPC 9.7. However, that is going to be in clause 9, not in clause 7. So we'll be dealing with that at a later time. And I think, Mr. Mehta, if I'm not mistaken, you said that is going to be following G13. Can you correct me on that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's right.
G13N.
That's right.
Right. And for those of you, I was waiting for someone to yell bingo, because I just think for those of you who are watching at home, no, this is not parliamentary bingo. There's no prize. So don't get out any cards or dabbers or anything of the sort. We're going through the line by line, clause by clause, and these are amendments from the floor. And essentially we just got it, and all members, you have them. I'm just going through a labeling exercise right now because these amendments, at least all but one, deal with clause number 7, and we are still in clause 7. Do I have any points of clarification that need to be answered at this time? Seeing none, we are going to proceed. Mr. Miller, our legislative clerk, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Reyes, just to confirm with you, the number 725, le numéro 725, vous vouliez pas le proposer?
Didn't you didn't want to propose this one right now, is that correct? You wanted to do that later? We can't hear you, you're on mute. So I think the last one is something we received via email. That's to my surprise. I didn't think we wanted to send it to members of the committee right away, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm not asking that we debate that, but once we're on clause 9, we'll get back to that.
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Okay. No, je parlais de...
So I was actually mentioning 3725. Reference number 3725.
When you get a moment, that's fine.
Well, as I was explaining earlier, I saw that in my emails. I didn't remember giving the order that it be sent to the members of the committee. So now you name the 9.7, but it doesn't mean that there won't be any other. So I don't think you should take that into account right now.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, go ahead.
So if you want to have a side chat, would be helpful.
Okay, so I'll instruct Mr. Reyes and Mr. Mela if you want to have an offline discussion.
It was with you, actually, Chair. Sorry.
Oh, you want to talk to me? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to, as you've just heard, I'm going to have to spend, and literally I'd like to do just 2 minutes. And it should be just that. So suspension for 2 minutes. Okay, ready to go? All right, we're back. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to our technical staff for all these breaks and suspensions and so on. And our technical staff handled it masterfully, I might add. We don't say that enough, but we thank you so much. Okay, now let's get back to the amendments at hand. These are amendments regarding Clause 7 that just came to us from the Conservative Party. And Mr. Reyes, I want to just point something out before we go any further, and I feel it's only necessary I do this in the course of debate. We have from 9.2 up to 9.6 regarding Clause 7, and they follow in succession. However, I would like for you to have a look at CPC 9.4. The last three reference numbers are 725. I want you to have a look at that for a moment. Okay. There is a problem here in the sense that, as you know, we propose these amendments in order of the bill in which they come in the bill itself, that's C10. In this particular case, what you're going for here, which would be by adding after line 2 on page 8 of the clause 7, what you're aiming to do should have been moved before PV 21.1, which we debated the last meeting and voted on this meeting. It should have been done just before that. So CPC 9.4, 725 is not in its right order. The others are. And I'm bringing this up to you now in case if you were hoping to incorporate that into your overall debate. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Normally I'd get to it and make a ruling, but I thought maybe you should know now before we proceed any further. So with that in mind, we return to clause by clause, and right now, the amendment 9.2, again, reference number 583, the last three numbers, CPC 9.2. Now, Mr. Reyes, I'm going to give you the floor. If you have any points of clarification, by all means, ask on the ruling I just made about 9.4. But in the meantime, you can proceed with CPC 9.2, and we're still on clause 7. Go ahead, sir, you have the floor. Sorry, sir, you're on mute. It's still Monday.
Oui, on est toujours lundi.
Oh, it's still being Monday. I'm having a hard time with the mute button. So I just want to make sure I don't make any mistakes here. So CPC 9.4, you're not refusing it. You're just flagging that it's not in the correct order. And I didn't have time.
En parler.
So I'm checking when I would be able to talk about that one.
Well, I think in this particular case, 9.4, since we've gone past it, if you want to return to it, you would need unanimous consent to do that, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. So I will cross that bridge when I get to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm guessing it's time for me to table 9.2 now. So thank you. So 9.2, given the situation where we have an impasse at the committee regarding different people who publish content on social media, and based on our reading of Bill C-10,
I'm going to have to ask you to stop for a moment because I don't want to lead you down the wrong path here of what you're trying to do. If your hope is to bring back 9.4 and seek out the consent to do that, you have to do that before we go any further. I think probably I'm going to go to Mr. Mela to see what the proper procedure is if you want the resurrection of 9.4. Mr. Mela, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Oui, Monsieur Reyes, le problème.
Mr. Reyes, the problem is that Amendment 3725 is supposed to be at a prior page, and the committee has already studied CPC 9.1, which fell at the same place in the bill, and we also already studied PV 21.1, and amendments must be studied in the order in which they appear in the bill. So if you want to ask for unanimous consent to go back to 9.4, you have to ask for it now. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Mela. I just want to do that in, as you know, my French is not good enough to explain it to the way he did it. So I wanted you to be of that understanding. So I'm going to, even though you proceeded, I'm going to allow, if you wish to do that, because I feel like I didn't want to lead you astray. So go ahead, sir, if you wish.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for your finesse on this. So yes, I would like to deal with things in the proper order, as Mr. Mela explained. So I will ask for the committee's unanimous consent for us to return to 9.4 if the committee allows it. If not, I will move on to 9.2.
Thank you very much for your patience, everyone. Again, this is the last three numbers, 725. It is CPC 9.4. What Mr. Reyes is asking for is, can we go back and do that amendment? He's seeking unanimous consent to go back and do that. I'm repeating myself only because I want everyone to fully understand what he's asking for. It is out of order. We should have dealt with it before, but in order to return to that, we need unanimous consent to do it. Does Mr. Reyes have unanimous consent?
No.
Sorry, sir, you do not. So that's CPC 9.4, which you can now take out of your package. We now go to CPC 9.2, reference number 583. Mr. Reyes, once again, sir, you have the floor. Thank you for your patience.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not surprised by the situation, but things must be dealt with in the correct order. And you did properly explain the situation. So I'll get rid of 9.4 and I will come back to my amendment CPC 9.2, which reads as following. And afterwards I will give my explanations. That Bill C-10 in Clause 7 be amended by adding, after line 19 on page 8, the following. 9.21, this act does not apply in respect of online undertakings that have fewer than 500,000 subscribers in Canada or receive less than $80 million per year in advertising, subscription, usage, or membership revenues in Canada from the transmission or retransmission of programs over the Internet. Every 2 years after the day on which subsection 1 comes into force, the Commission must, with the approval of the Governing Council, review the subscriber and revenue thresholds and may make regulations to increase them as required. So this proposed amendment is following different discussions we've had at the committee regarding users who are not professional broadcasters or digital broadcasters. There's a big difference between the powers that we are giving to the CRTC to regulate not only on users, but also regulate the content of those users. So we have experts on both sides, and I won't come back to that debate. But this is a lesser of evils, we could say, to give the CRTC guidelines within this bill to ensure that people, including artists who have fewer than 500,000 subscribers in Canada, not be regulated by the CRTC. Because as artists, they must be free to promote their art around the world. And these artists are asking for absolutely no grants or help. They work solo, they're online, and they do not want the government to meddle in these online platforms. So there are artists that we all know, and we all root for them when we set up projects for concert halls. And we want for all of those people to be factored in to Bill C-10. So that is what CPC 9.2 is asking for, and I look forward to hearing the points of view of my fellow committee members, including those from my own party and other political parties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Just for clarification to our clerk, Amy, there's nobody in the room right now. Is that correct? Everybody is on Zoom? All colleagues? Okay. I just want to make sure so that way I can just go with the list I see on Zoom. So that brings me to Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank Mr. Reyes for his amendment. The question that I have right now is, can you tell me a little bit about how you came up with that 500,000 and the 80 million per year in the first clause or the first part? And then also, if you could also comment on when the last sentence of the second part where it says, and may make regulations to increase them as required, is there a reason that it is increase, not increase or decrease them as required?
Sorry, I heard there was a question in there, but I too have a question for, sorry, Ms. McPherson, your question was directed at Mr. Reyes. Okay, before I let him, two things, that question, if you recall, and also you read the text, but you missed number 3, which is on the second page of this particular amendment. Were you including that as well, or not including that?
Are you referring to me?
I'm sorry, Ms. McPherson. No, I was referring to Mr. Reyes on his amendment. I'm looking at number 3. So could you answer both those? Thank you, Mr. Reyes. You have the floor.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You are quite right. I did not read part 3, so I'll do it right away to make sure everyone's on the same page. So thank you for correcting me. So part 3 says, the minister must prepare a report on the Commission's review under subsection 2 and submit the report to the Standing Committee of each House of Parliament that normally considers matters related to broadcasting. So that is a very important point because it asks the minister to report on the situation. So if I may, Mr. Chair, I would like to answer Ms. McPherson's questions. Yes? Thank you. So, Ms. McPherson, that is a very relevant question because why 500,000? Why not 700,000? Why not 200,000 subscribers? We needed to set the threshold somewhere, and so I tabled this amendment this morning, and this is the threshold that is recommended by the former director of the CRTC. So we didn't pull it out of a hat. So it was Mr. Fitzgibbon and also Peter Menzies deemed this threshold to be appropriate for the current situation. And this would make it so that major broadcasters would not be excluded from the bill. But someone posting on social media, well, they consider that with this threshold, those people would be protected. So those who have 525,000 would fall into a gray area, but in the second part and the third part, we include stipulations to allow for changes to be made if necessary. So I consider this to be a very worthwhile way to protect all Canadians who are sharing content so that they would not be fall under CRTC regulation. I would like to point out that the Prime Minister of Australia is often quoted because they proposed $100 million and also more subscribers than we have proposed in our amendment. The Australian model was the double of what we are proposing. So our threshold is reasonable based on that. And also we drew inspiration for this from the former major players at the CRTC. So I don't know if I answered your question, Ms. McPherson. I did my best, even though I am not an expert.
Mr. Reyes.
Ms. McPherson, go ahead.
Sorry, you answered one of the two questions very, very well, I'd like to just point out. But the other one is in section 2 where it says regulations to increase them as required. Why does it only have increase there? Why does it not have increase or decrease as required?
Mr. Reyes.
So, Ms. McPherson, that is, again, a very valid question. If you would like to propose a sub-amendment, we would be open to that. In our view, the only way it could change would be to increase. These are Canadians who are posting things online. And if we were to agree on the 500,000 subscribers, we considered that they would only increase their subscribers and not decrease them. So that is the lens that we used when we chose that wording. We weren't expecting for it to decrease. We were thinking everyone increases their followers. I think it's rare for subscribers to decrease over time, especially for artists.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just pulling my hand down. There you go. Well, I find this amendment interesting for two reasons. One, that it seems to very much mirror an amendment that had been voted down by this committee previously. But in addition, what it is trying to carve out, again, contributions towards our cultural production funds. And in light of what Ms. Harder said in her local press, I believe that, in fact, a lot of what the Conservatives are seeking to do right now is, in fact, to just to reduce our cultural production funds as a whole. And part of the reason why I feel this way is because this quote kind of stood out to me, which is that arts fund actually goes towards a very niche group of artists that are stuck in the early 1990s because they haven't managed to be competitive on new platforms. So they are very reliant on government grants in order to continue to exist. And quite frankly, they are producing material that Canadians just don't want. I apologize.
One moment. Point of order, Mr. Aitchison, go ahead.
I'm wondering if Mr. Brusen could focus on the actual amendment instead of what, another conservative member has said to our local media and focus specifically on the amendment.
And Mr. Aitchison, as you know, I like for those to build an arc around what they want to talk about. Folks, can we just zero in here on focusing on the amendment itself? I'm assuming, Mr. Brusen, you were coming around to that point.
I was.
You may proceed.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair, because it goes to the point about contributions to the funds, which is actually what this amendment goes to. So if I may just complete it to make sure that it's clear what I believe is the actual background to this amendment. And then I will have a question actually beyond that. Because at the end of the day, if Canadians did want it, then there would be a market for it. And there would be a market for it, then these artists would get paid based on the market. So basically in that quote, there's a very huge disrespect, a tremendous disrespect for our cultural production funds and for our artists. So as I pointed out, there is that background to it, as well as the fact that this is something that the committee's already considered. I was wondering if perhaps a department could help me to better understand what's the impact of this amendment? Like, what would be the net impact of allowing this amendment to proceed?
Okay, I'm going to look to our officials. I'm seeking out a volunteer. I see Mr. Ripley's hand again. Mr. Ripley, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Mr. Brusen. So based on what I understand the amendment to be, the starting point in the bill currently is that the CRTC should only regulate online undertakings if it's of the opinion that they will contribute in a material manner to the fulfillment of the policy objectives of the Broadcasting Act. So again, the bill as it was tabled recognized that if the CRTC came to the conclusion that a service did not have sufficient subscribers or viewers in Canada, or wasn't making sufficient revenue, that the CRTC's starting point is that they should not regulate those services. So if I understand the amendment correctly, what's being proposed to the committee is that in addition to that, as it currently stands, Parliament would essentially make an exclusion of services, online undertakings, I think is the term that is being used in the amendment, with a specific subscriber base and revenue base. I believe, if I understood correctly, that it's 500,000 subscribers, and so again, just less than $80 million per year in a variety of different kinds of revenue. So if either one of those was triggered, because the amendment uses the word or, the CRTC would not be able to impose regulatory contributions on those services. So in essence, Mr. Brusen, it would be Parliament making a call off the top, so to speak, that services that don't meet these thresholds should not be subject to contributing to the cultural policy objectives of the Act.
Okay. Mr. Housefather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. J'en ai quelques questions pour Monsieur Reyes aussi.
I also have a few questions for Mr. Reyes. Indeed, I'm not quite sure whether I'm for or against. However, I'd like to hear Mr. Reyes on this right now, because I'm quite open to discuss this subject. What I don't really understand now is why we say that, you're excluded if you have fewer than 500 subscribers, or if you receive less than $80 million. And why not? I mean, why one and the other? Oh, one or the other. Now, if I have 495,000 subscribers and I earn $2 billion because of the fact that it's, very costly. So should we say that a company that earns $2 billion is sufficiently big to be included? Or, for example, if I have 30 million subscribers in Canada, but I have very few revenues in terms of subscription because I have another source of revenue that I'm using, which is not one of the revenues included on the list. So why, when you say it's either one or the other, you're excluded? I don't really understand. So Mr. Reyes can maybe clarify this?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, this is a very relevant question from my colleague, Mr. Housefather. Now, if we had decided about threshold ourselves, we probably would have been told that this is partisan. So, Ms. de Bruzen has tried in her comment to attack us on that, but I just highlighted that this actually comes from former chairs of the CRTC, a commissioner of the CRTC. This recommendation that you see here, and I go even further, when Ms. de Bruzen was attacking this proposal, which, by the way, is an amendment that we're going to debate on, and, we raise question, as you're doing very well, Mr. Housefather. I think we're having a very democratic exercise, and we reflect also concerns of our citizens, and we need to share all of that, even if it's not of the government opinion. But I go even further. I mean, Australia also determined certain amounts. Rather than 500, it's 1 million. Instead of 80 million, it's $100 million in revenue. So the country which is quoted as an example has even higher thresholds in using or. So the question or and, they did the same thing as what we're proposing with even higher thresholds. So I think what we're actually contributing is legitimate, and I think does deserve us to discuss it. Now, maybe one tiny specification. I am a math teacher and a manager also in terms of school principal. I have managed budgets, so the or, it's not logical to think that someone who would have 30 million, let's say 300,000 subscribers, could have 2 billion in revenues. I mean, the figures which are here are realistic. So, Netflix of these world, would have higher revenues than. So we talk about Canadians which are on the net, that share content, that have small companies which are on the margin. And I like to say that often. Sometimes, we seem to be in our bubble in Ottawa as parliamentarian, and I include myself in that. I stated my children as example or friends, and so we're kind of lagging behind on regulations with people who are sitting in their offices. However, there is a parallel world that pushes us, that is living on the digital era, and they don't have lobbyists. They're not seeking for government funding. So it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have grants to help artists or creators. It's not that we're against them. Of course not. Some really need it. I have a mayor of a city where I set up a project. I had also grants and support, and we know that it's important to promote arts for children. And very often it's not possible without grants. Otherwise we'd just have some specific type of shows, but others are living in this parallel digital universe, and they don't want to have government involvement because it's going to be a burden if they have to fill out forms. I mean, we know what happens with the CRTC and the fees. So I believe that the proposal that I'm submitting today is a proposal that, even if, the amounts seem to be quite high, it's not irrational. First of all, it's a former commissioner and chair of the CRTC that did that same proposal, and there are under the threshold of what Australia is proposing, for example, which seems to be the standard right now because they were the first to do that in the world. And I would like to emphasize also that this is not our first wish. For was more important, but as it didn't go, we believe that this would be some kind of a protection. I'm done. Of a job.
And now we go to, sorry, Mr. Housefather, were you done? Okay, Mr. Wall, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me put some context to this amendment. And in the committee, you remember Mr. Chan of Facebook coming, and I asked him this question. Do you know that Facebook is used today for broadcasting? This is where this amendment came from. I know hundreds of former broadcasters who have been laid off or let go that now have a show on Facebook, a 1 hour show, maybe 2-3 hour shows. Bob McGowan, Peterson, Rod Peterson, Don Cherry. And this is where the amendment comes from, Mr. Housefather. Mr. Chan could not answer my question when he came to committee with the Facebook group in February, as I asked Facebook the question, do you know people are using Facebook as a broadcasting tool? They're selling advertising on Facebook for their shows. They have subscribers. He claimed he knew nothing about this, which I found it hard. But this is where this amendment comes from. And then I flagged it with our side saying this is going to explode because what's happening are these people are entrepreneurs, and to keep their hand in the broadcasting industry, they've taken to Facebook to do these shows. Mr. Ripley, you are correct when you answered that. But this amendment by Mr. Reyes talks about this. So do we want the CRTC regulating everyone with 10 subscribers and $1,000 coming in? No, we don't want that. So this figure arrived from the Australian figure, more or less, and we used the former commissioner of the CRTC and vice commissioner. So we went to him and asked, this is a big issue in this country. And you know, it's going to get more and more as we see less and less conventional broadcasting, whether it's radio or TV stations going dark. This is something that has been coming for the last 3 to 4 years on social media. And so I flagged it in February with Mr. Chan, who claimed at the time Facebook knew nothing about it. But so this amendment is very important to the Broadcasting Act. I would say one of the most important amendments that we can make, because people in this country are using Facebook to generate subscribers. They're using Facebook to generate money and advertising, which according to Mr. Chan, that was fine. So I'm going to back up what Mr. Reyes said, and I just, on layman terms, this is where this amendment came from. The discussion, Mr. Chair, that we had with Facebook officials in February or March when they came, because I flagged this, I see many people in this country making money off Facebook, which is fine, but are we going to overregulate them with the CRTC, or is there going to be a threshold? We think the 500,000 subscribers and $80 million per year is the threshold. So if I can give you some context in the amendment, here it is. And it was through the questions that I proposed to Mr. Chan and Facebook that we felt that this amendment had to be included in the regulations. Thank you.
Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple more questions for Mr. Reyes before I go forward. First of all, he's talked a little bit about the thresholds, and I think I would want to amend that because in my mind, I feel like we also don't want to exclude those that want to be part of this, and that's something I'm going to ask him about. But does he have any statistics on how many are above and how many are below that threshold? And also if he's had any conversation with the cultural sector, if he's asked any of the cultural sector or the artists that are impacted by, say, YouTube, what they would suggest in terms of this amendment. So I also have a question I'd like to ask Mr. Ripley, if I could. I'll just get them all out and you can manage all of my requests as you see fit. But the question I have for Mr. Ripley is, would the exclusion apply to all of the Act and not just the requirement to make a financial contribution? So for example, every reference to an online undertaking in the Act would exclude those who do not meet this threshold. Is that correct, I guess, is what I'd like a little more clarity on.
Okay, two questions here. Your first put one to Mr. Reyes. Or would you like to take the floor, Mr. Reyes, to answer? Or else I'm going to go to Mr. Ripley.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I do not have statistics in my possession as Ms. McPherson has asked for. I will try to find some. I'm looking for some now. So if you could give Mr. Ripley the chance to answer first, I would have some time to look for those. Thank you.
I'll come back to you in just a moment. Mr. Ripley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Ms. McPherson. So based on what I understand the amendment to be, it begins with this act does not apply in respect, and then it moves into the various thresholds. So that means that if an online undertaking did not meet those thresholds, it would not be subject to the act at all. So that would not be subject to the CRTC's jurisdiction with respect to any of its regulatory powers, whether that's seeking a financial contribution, whether that's its information gathering powers, whether that's its administrative monetary penalties regime. So all of those tools would not be applicable.
All right, back to Mr. Reyes. Did you want to respond once more, or shall I go back?
J'aimerais bien répondre.
I would like to answer the question, but I am not able to at this time. So if I may, Mr. Chair, could you come back to me later once I have a chance to get that information? Unfortunately, otherwise, Ms. McPherson, I can't answer today.
I'm going to give you the floor. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to do a little clarification, Mr. Reyes. Did you actually consult with the cultural sector? So I know that asking you for statistics is a little bit unfair and in the moment, so I'm happy to let you have some time on that. But did you consult with the cultural sector before drafting this amendment? Just didn't get around to that one question.
Okay. Before I go to Mr. Reyes, just to point out to everybody, I know we've been doing this a lot lately where we ask our colleagues pointed questions. I think they're perfectly valid, but just a note to colleagues, you don't have to take the floor if you don't wish to. Not saying you wouldn't, Mr. Reyes, so it's back to you if you so desire to take the floor to answer the question.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for clarifying that. But it is always a pleasure for me. I always want to answer questions, whether it be from journalists or fellow colleagues. So I will answer it to the best of my knowledge, and if I am mistaken, I do apologize. So, Ms. McPherson, for your question, yes, I did consult at least 40 cultural organizations from the sector since the beginning of our study of this bill, C-10. That does not mean that all of the cultural organizations agreed in the exchanges that we had with them. All of the amendments that we proposed, or almost all of them, I should say, we made sure not to make them specific so that it did represent more than one organization. And God knows that I have a thick stack of documents that I kept from all of our consultations. So some of that included concerns by certain groups who weren't necessarily against our idea. But, Mr. Chair, I would like to finish with this. So the bill changed partway through our study of it. And if I had known that social media would have been included from the get-go, then we, as a party, would have proposed witnesses to represent those who were forgotten, those who we did not hear from at the beginning during the committee study. So certainly this amendment will help people we did not have the opportunity to hear from. And I think that all of us were surprised by what happened. And I repeat that this amendment goes straight to the heart of what Australia has done and what has been recommended as a threshold by former CRTC experts, and it is less than the Australia threshold. So I find it very valid.
Ms. DeBruzen. Oh, wait, now, hold on. Is that correct? I thought I had Mr. Shields in there first. I apologize. Mr. Shields, if I got that wrong, I apologize in advance. But Ms. DeBruzen, according to my list here, I have you next. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying, and perhaps the department can help me with getting some clarification, because the way I understood Mr. Waugh's argument, he was talking about user uploaded content to companies, and I understand that user uploaded content is excluded. I was wondering if perhaps I could get some clarification. This proposal is about the companies, is it not? And if you can just help clarify that for me.
I'm looking, Mr. Ripley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Mr. Bruzen. So the term that's being used in the amendment is online undertaking, which the committee may recall is the umbrella term that captures a variety of different online businesses, including services like streaming services like Netflix or Crave or Spotify, as well as more distribution type services like Amazon channels or another kind of service like that, as well as the committee knows well at this point, social media services. So the amendment on the table is not only with respect to social media services. The term online undertaking captures that umbrella term, capturing all those types of services that I just alluded to. The question about how this interfaces with other provisions in the Act. So just to remind the committee that Section 2.1 of the Act specifically excludes non-affiliated users who upload content.
It seems we've lost Mr. Ripley. I'm not the only one, right?
And or a Facebook user who has a very large following and may be earning a substantial amount of revenue, and they would not be caught by the Act because of that exclusion. And so the amendment that's on the table doesn't change that fact. That Section 2.1 is currently still part of the bill and would apply.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Mr. Lewis.
It's only a technical thing, Mr. Chair. Sorry. I believe Mr. Ripley got the transmission was broken, and I just couldn't hear him at a very critical spot. I wondered if he could repeat that just on a technical side. I don't believe we could hear his answer fully.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Lewis. I was going to intervene myself, but Mr. Ripley, you were momentarily cut from there. The flow of the conversation didn't quite sync up at some point. It's no reflection on your ability, sir. It's just your computer, your internet. So would you repeat the last point once more? And then Mr. Lewis, you can give me a thumbs up if you're satisfied. Mr. Ripley.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, maybe you could just indicate where I got cut off.
Mr. Lewis, I'm going to call to you right now for that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I mean, if you could repeat the whole answer, it would help with the flow. It just really would.
Okay. How about Mr. Ripley? We do it all again for posterity. Go ahead.
Certainly. So just to recap, what I indicated is that the term being used by the amendment is online undertaking, which, as the committee is aware is a definition provided for in the Act that captures a variety of different online business models, including streaming services like Netflix or Crave TV or Spotify, as well as more distribution type services. One could think of Amazon channels or comparable services, as well as social media services. And so with respect to the interplay with other provisions in the Act, what I indicated was, or reminded the committee, is that Section 2.1 is in the Act. And what 2.1 says is that an unaffiliated user of a social media service is not to be considered a broadcaster for the purposes of the Act. And that doesn't matter how many subscribers they may have or how much revenue they earn from those activities. If they are using a social media service to carry out those activities, they're not considered a broadcaster for the purpose of the Act. And so I was simply highlighting that the amendment on the table doesn't override or change that Section 2.1 and the exclusion provided in it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ripley. Is everyone able to hear me and see me? I need some thumbs. I'm having issues of my own here. As long as you can hear me, I see Mr. Fortin enthusiastically thumb up. So let me just proceed by going. Now, Ms. DeBruzen, were you finished?
I am. I'll put my hat down.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shields, and I apologize if I overlooked you earlier.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going way back in the conversation when we started, and Mr. Bruce, when you were expressing concern about financial contributions that would go to cultural groups. So I think this amendment established a base, and I'm not an accountant, absolutely not. That's the last thing I am. But is there some belief, and I know, Mr. Chair, that you suggested we could ask other colleagues on the panel questions if they choose to respond. That's up to them. Thank you. But I was wondering if you were believing this created a loss of revenue for the cultural groups. I just thought a base in the sense of one level or another, like the Australian model, had some validity to it in the sense of numbers and money. I know the G7 have come to some kind of a taxing thing on the weekend, and already somebody was pointing out the loopholes by which Amazon might get around that. And we may face that with this as well. But is it your belief then that this type of amendment was built around trying to get around the revenue from the major techs we've talked about many times? Is this your concern that there's a loss of revenue here with this type of amendment?
Sorry, Mr. Shields, I apologize. You broke up there, at least for me. Who was your question pointed to?
Ms. DeBruzen.
Oh, Ms. DeBruzen. I apologize. Ms. DeBruzen, would you like to weigh in?
Just as a quick second to say, I was just pointing out that it has come up in the House, it has come up in debate, and it came up in that article that the Conservatives have said that Canadian creators are a niche market, and that there has been a devaluing or a certain denigration of having cultural production programs and funds to support our Canadian creators. And so it does cause me to question the filibustering that we have seen, as well as the onslaught of this many new amendments being proposed and how it's been happening. So that is my point, and I think it's been raised in the House in debate, here at committee in the ongoing debate, and in that article that I quoted.
Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're not referring specifically to this amendment as you believe it's a loss of revenue to, you're speaking about other issues that you've heard in different places then?
I'm assuming your question is for Ms.
DeBruzen?
Ms. DeBruzen? No? Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Shields.
No, good.
You're good? Okay. Seeing no further conversation, seeing no further debate, that brings us now to a vote. Once more, this is CPC. Yes, Ms. DeBruzen, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I do believe, though, that raises a valid question that perhaps if I could ask the department about what if there's any analysis as to the number of funds, what would be the impact on cultural production funds from this amendment. It might assist in the argument given just what Mr. Shields has raised.
Okay, Mr. Ripley, would you care to answer, or someone else? Mr. Ripley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Ms. DeBruzen. It's one I'm not able to kind of give a definitive amount on the spot. It would take us going back and looking at some of the analysis that the department has done underpinning that $830 million number to kind of look at how it might intersect with some of the thresholds that are being put forward. What I would highlight, for example, though, is that, again, the Bill C-10 put down the marker about material manner, but left it a little bit in the CRTC's discretion because, again, not all services are comparable. And so, for example, what I would point the committee towards is with respect to CBC Jam or Two Point TV, which we know are national public broadcasters' online undertakings. The department's assessment of that was right now those undertakings have about 200,000 subscribers and maybe earn somewhere in the $20 to $30 million range in revenue each year. So yet the government's perspective would be that obviously our national public broadcaster and its online undertakings have a powerful role that they can play in contributing to the cultural policies objectives of the Broadcasting Act. Yet, the intersection with this amendment is that even those online undertakings launched by our national public broadcaster could be excluded if they don't meet the revenue threshold. So, but Mr. Brusen, we'd have to do some further analysis to actually look at kind of the intersection with all the services and assess kind of how that might change our analysis.
Mr. Housefather.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm going to come back to a point that I had previously raised, and this time I'm going to ask Mr. Ripley because I still am at a bit of a loss here to understand why, if we were to exclude various online undertakings, we would say that they could be excluded if they fall below either X number of subscribers or X amount of revenues per year, thus leaving an online undertaking that could earn $2 billion excluded because they had fewer than 500,000 subscribers. And while I did listen to Mr. Reyes and his mathematical skills, I could simply see that you charge a lot of money for example, for a certain service, and you could be up at a threshold. If you're charging $250 a year and you have 490,000 subscribers, you could be earning $2 billion a year from Canadians, yet excluded. So I guess I would kind of like to ask Mr. Ripley if the department was considering at any time such a limitation, meaning that smaller online undertakings would be excluded from the application of the Act. What formulation was the department or would the department suggest the committee consider in the event we are going to go in that direction? Should it be if the way it is formulated here, or should it be that you would have to be both below one and below the other to be excluded?
Mr. Ripley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Mr. Housefather. Perhaps I begin by, again, reiterating that, the government's position when it tabled Bill C-10 was acknowledging that there will be many, many smaller services that are not scoped into the Act because of that requirement for there to be a material contribution. The goal was not to scope all those smaller services in. I think the challenge is that there is a wide variety of different business models in the online undertaking space. So you have subscription-based services that we all know well, like like Netflix or Crave. You pick your favorite subscription services. More and more, right? We are seeing the launch of advertising supported business models where you can, stream your television content or your music content and not actually pay a subscription fee, but rather the service is selling advertising.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
One moment, please. Ms. Ian, go ahead. Your point of order.
So sorry to interrupt there, but the bells are ringing in the House.
Yeah.
We have to vote.
I was going to address that. I wanted Mr. Ripley to finish his sentence.
My apologies.
That's okay. That's all right. Mr. Ripley, do you have anything to sum up very quickly?
To wrap up, what I would suggest to Mr. Housefather is, I think that the department's perspective is to express perhaps a bit of caution on kind of picking numbers without kind of a full regulatory proceeding to get some evidence and basis on the table, because a service has a low number of subscribers or a high number of subscribers, they can still potentially make different contributions, again, depending on that revenue level or that subscriber level. So it's different to state it. It's difficult to state it categorically. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ripley. Now, folks, the bells are ringing, as Ms. Ian pointed out. We have 10 minutes left in this meeting. Between the bell time and voting time, that's going to well surpass. So I have two options. I have a speakers list. I have Mr. Lewis next. And we can proceed, but I need unanimous consent in order to do that. Otherwise, we have to shut down. So given the fact that we have 10 minutes left in the meeting, I see on the clock it's somewhere around 27, 26 minutes to vote. I'm going to put the question forward to finish off the meeting. Would you like to continue? Go ahead, Mr. Reyes. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair? I'm in a different building, but I have to be in the House, so I have to go there. So unfortunately, it's impossible. And I think that even with the 2 in 10 minutes, I don't think that we'll be done with all the requests that we've heard. So I'm not in agreement with the request that you made about unanimous consent. So I have to go to the House to do my job there.
Hearing no.
So
this meeting until next time, unless I have one go ahead. Is that it? All right. Happy voting, everybody. And we will see you on Friday at the regular time and regular place. One moment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So adjourn.